Sadly, it is not unusual to find drivers engaging in other activities that divert their attention away from the road. Given the ever-increasing popularity, expansion, and prevalence of technology in our everyday lives, it comes as no real surprise that one of the most common activities drivers do on the road is use their mobile phones. But drivers are 4 times more likely to be involved in a road accident when they are giving their attention to a mobile phone. Studies have even suggested the impairments dealt to driving performance because of simultaneous mobile phone use might be just as profound as those caused by alcohol intoxication. In Australia alone, the risk is so clear that it is now illegal to physically interact with a mobile phone while on the road. So, why do people still do it? My name is Terence Crowe, presented here through the form of a fez-wearing gumball with a bow tie. I don't know, I just sort of threw it together at the last minute. And today we're going to tackle this question from a psychological perspective. In 2011, Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman suggested 2 distinct systems of thought that drive the way we process information and the way we behave. He called them System 1 and System 2. Now, System 1 is described as fast, automatic, unconscious, and a means of quickly processing new information. On the other hand, System 2 is slow, effortful, logical, conscious, and is used when more deliberate attention is given to a problem or action. To put that into a fun analogy, System 1 is an underpaid assistant dangerously close to overdosing on coffee because their deadline is always right now, while System 2 is an old grandmother whose slow needlework would put Michelangelo to shame. But today we're more interested in System 1. System 1 is working virtually all the time, and while it is invaluable to more easily navigating a noisy world where things can be a bit unclear at times, it is not without its flaws. Many mental shortcuts working under System 1 can lead to misinterpretations and the development of things like false beliefs. And in the case of mobile phones in driving, it's likely that these cognitive mechanisms are partly to blame, specifically the above average effect, confirmation bias, and the availability heuristic. Firstly, let's take a look at the above average effect. As the name would suggest, it's where people tend to overestimate their own skills and qualities compared to the same traits in others. It's the equivalent of imagining you're wearing some 6 shades while something behind you explodes with the fury of 1,000 suns after making a U-turn. Because you know, deep down inside, no one else could have made that U-turn like you made that U-turn. It's just science, people. Now, it probably comes as no surprise that drivers generally judge themselves to be pretty hot stuff when it comes to using a mobile phone safely while driving. You yourself might even believe you can swerve out of the way from an oncoming bus full of screaming children, all while telling your friend Samantha about that sick U-turn you made earlier. But a 2016 study found that people who are more confident in their multitasking abilities are actually more likely to make mistakes, which could have disastrous consequences for drivers who think of themselves as multitasking gods, as well as the people around them. This is then closely intertwined with our next suspect, confirmation bias, a cognitive mechanism whereby evidence that is consistent with our beliefs is sought out and brought to our attention, while all contradictory evidence is ignored. Obviously, this would be pretty bad if a driver believes they are indeed multitasking incarnate, when they actually aren't. Confirmation bias could misleadingly reinforce this false belief and put the driver and those around them at greater risk, thinking they are safer than they actually are. Now, another study conducted in 2016 found that participants in a driving simulator were unaware of the impairments in their driving ability afterwards if they were using a mobile phone in the simulation. This suggests their beliefs about their own driving ability led them to unconsciously ignore these mistakes. Hence, like a well-meaning parent who doesn't want to tell little Timmy about what really happened to Bugsy the puppy last summer, confirmation bias clouds drivers' self-evaluations and puts them in a false sense of security. This leads us to the last member of our rogues gallery, the availability heuristic. Ordinarily, the availability heuristic is useful for evaluating the likelihood of an event occurring based on how easily examples and information related to that event come to mind. Information that springs to mind easier is given more importance by the brain, and any decision based on this information is a decision based on the availability heuristic. But it is important to note that this is regardless of whether or not this information is actually accurate or appropriate. It's a psychological equivalent to first come first served, where the person who first arrived is wearing an overly long trench coat and you don't know if they're hiding a bouquet of flowers or the person themselves is actually a group of snot-nosed kids stacked on top of one another. Bringing this back to the topic at hand, it is likely that if drivers are not aware of their errors and they do not experience any traumatic events on the road while using a mobile phone, they are probably going to recall these instances as being much safer than they actually were. Based on the availability heuristic, they will then likely interpret this information to mean the risks for mobile phone use while driving are lower than the reality. With all of these cognitive errors potentially acting upon us, it can be daunting to consider how to go about protecting ourselves from their influence. The good thing is, now that you are aware of these cognitive mechanisms and have specific examples for how they can manifest, you should be able to better identify them when they happen in everyday life and guard yourself against their effects. Of course, I do have some individual strategies as well. For those prone to the above average effect, or those who sincerely believe they are a good enough multitasker to ride the roads with phone in hand, I have one request. Ask yourself, why exactly am I better than most people at multitasking? And what would it take to convince me otherwise? For the confirmation bias, while it's clear I don't condone using a mobile phone while driving, if you are going to, then I'd suggest you pay careful attention to how you're performing while you're doing it. Actively look for any mistakes System 1 may be automatically ignoring. That way you'll be less likely to reinforce a false belief. And for those who fall at the feet of the availability heuristic, before you decide to use your mobile phone on the road, think back to all the times you've done it before and consider how these instances might have looked from other perspectives. Ask yourself, am I the best person to judge how I was driving then? Was I aware of absolutely everything that was happening at the time? And could mistakes have been made without my notice? Finally, a couple of general suggestions. Make a habit of either turning your phone off completely or setting it to silent when you get into the car, and hide it from view in a place that is either outside or just on the very edge of your reach. This way you'll be less tempted to use your phone while driving and more likely to make it to your destination without a hitch. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share this video so that more people are aware of these cognitive errors and so our roads can be a much safer place to travel.